Hi folks, this is Dr. Swanberg. I am here to review for your midterm exam with you and give you some tips on how to study effectively. The test is going to be in two parts, so let's go over what the test will look like. There are two parts to this test. You have to take both parts, part 1 and part 2. They're both marked midterm part 1, midterm part 2, and they're both in unit 8. So you need to take both of them through ProctorU in the same ProctorU session. The test, both parts combined, is worth 150 points. It has been created in two parts so that you can have immediate feedback on part 1, which is multiple choice. The first section contains 50 multiple choice questions and is worth 100 points. That means that each question is worth 2 points each. You will get immediate feedback on this part of the test because I've already input the answers and it'll be automatically graded. The second part of the test contains 5 short answer questions for an additional 50 points. You can earn up to 10 points on each one with thoughtful, carefully developed answers. Answers in this section need to be a minimum of 5 complete sentences, and they should be checked carefully for grammar, spelling, capitalization, and punctuation. These are little tiny paragraphs that you're writing, and they need to be thoughtful like a paragraph and structured like a paragraph. These questions require instructor grading, so you will have your results for this section within 1 week. You should make an attempt on every single question in both the multiple choice and the short answer. Please don't leave anything blank. In the multiple choice, it just doesn't do you any harm to take a guess. And in the short answer section, you can actually get partial credit if you put in something. So even an answer that's really off the mark might get a 2 because you got something in there that's accurate. So try to get your partial credit. Don't skip anything. Okay, let's talk about part 1 in a little bit more depth. Part 1 of the midterm is entirely multiple choice, and it covers the following topics: active reading practices, that's Unit 2, topic, main idea, and supporting details, that's Unit 3, inference, that's Unit 5, and tone and purpose, that's Unit 6. It also contains vocabulary lists 1 and 2, and that's from Units 4 and 5. Now, the vocabulary comes from our novel, as you know. So all of the vocabulary comes from the novel, and that's where I've gotten those words for you to learn. However, this portion of the test does not contain informational questions about the island of Dr. Moreau, so I'm not going to be asking you, like, what's the guy's name who met him on the island when he first got there. So I'm not going to be asking you that kind of question. These are really the same kinds of questions that you had on your quizzes. If you did well on your quizzes and you really weren't reliant on notes or a tutor or anything like that when you took your quizzes, you should be in great shape for this midterm. So the quiz grades are really a great gauge. If you were successful on the quizzes and didn't have to use your notes a lot for those, you're going to be in wonderful shape for part 1 of the midterm. This is how I would study for part 1. First, I would review my quizzes. I'd make sure I understood anything that I got wrong and what the correct answer was and where to find that correct answer and how to understand that correct answer. Then I would review my chapters in the art of critical reading. And then I would rewatch my video lectures and make sure I take notes. I would review the quizzes before I did this so that as I'm reading and watching the video lectures, I can be looking specifically for the things that tripped me up when I was taking the quiz. Then I would make some note cards to help myself memorize vocabulary and key terms and concepts. And I'm going to kind of tell you how a note card system works. It's a really effective system for studying, especially when there's any kind of rote memorization like there is for the vocabulary. Okay, so here's a sample note card. The front is in red and the back is in blue. Notice that you don't have a ton of information on any one note card. You have a word on the front and its definition on the back. So here's an example of a note card for inference. Just says inference on the front, and on the back it says the definition for inference, using details from the text and your own prior knowledge, experience, and instincts to answer questions about the text that the text doesn't offer direct answers for. And then there's a little clue, reading between the lines, reading things that aren't necessarily spelled out for you in the text. Let's take a look at another example of a note card. Here's one for a vocabulary word. And again, very, very simple, not a ton of information. If you try to put like 10 words on a note card, it's not going to serve you very well in what we use the note cards for. So grotesque is a word that comes up in our reading a lot, and it means horrible to look at or disgusting. So those are some note cards. And then what do you do with the note cards? What you do with the note cards, and there's going to be a lot of them. There should be a lot of note cards because there's just a tiny little bit of information. I would take a slide from one of your video lectures and turn each slide into a card with just a little tiny tidbit of information on each card. So once you've made all your note cards, that's number one, you've done a great job studying just by making the note cards. And it's helpful for you to review the information just by creating them. Once you've created them, put them in a big bowl, stir the bowl, and pull out a card. And no matter what side of the card is facing you, you try to guess what's on the other side. So if you pull it out and it says horrible to look at or disgusting, you want to be able to pull out grotesque. If it says grotesque, you want to be able to pull out horrible and disgusting. Okay, so if you guess the answer, or if you know the answer, if you guess correctly and quickly, and you just know it cold, you set the card aside. You know that one. It's good. You don't have to fuss about it anymore. If you guess incorrectly, however, or if you have to really think about it for a long time, what I want you to do is read each side of the card aloud 3 times and put it back in the bowl and stir the bowl. So you might say, grotesque, horrible to look at, disgusting. Grotesque, horrible to look at, disgusting. Grotesque, horrible to look at, disgusting, and then put it back in the bowl. It's really important to say it out loud 3 times or 4 times or 5 times because that repetition will help get it in your head and help you remember it. Stir the bowl once you've put it back in and pick again. And you repeat this process until the bowl is empty. And the bowl is only empty when you can very quickly guess at every single card that's in that bowl. All right, and that's how I would study for that multiple choice section. The sample note card, I went up instead of down, excuse me, one moment. All right, let's look at part 2. What does part 2 look like? Part 2 asks you to apply the concepts of topic, main idea, and detail, inference, and tone and purpose. These are the concepts from the art of critical reading that we've covered so far. And it asks you to simply apply those concepts in a little bit more depth than a multiple choice question. Okay, so you might be asked to explain a concept in your own words. In other words, can you explain the difference between a topic and a main idea in your own words? Can you explain what tone is or how you decide what a novel's purpose is in your own words? Okay. You might be asked to tell me how the term applies to the novel, The Island of Dr. Moreau. In other words, what do you think the main idea of the book is? How are we using inferences in the book? What's the topic of the book? What are some of the main ideas and details in the book? So those are the kinds of things I'm going to be asking. The final kind of question you're going to get in the short answer question is a short passage from the novel, and then you're answering a question about what you've read. Now, these are passages that are taken from the early chapters in the novel, so I expect them to be familiar to you already. I'm not giving you something from the end of the novel. So these are passages that maybe we've already talked about, that I may have already called to your attention on a discussion board. And I'm going to be asking you questions like, what can we infer about what he says in this passage? What are we being asked to notice here? What's the tone in what this person is saying? And those are the kinds of questions that I want you to be able to answer, having read this stuff about the art of critical reading and having read the novel. I would when I study for part 2, I would reread the chapters of the novel that you've been assigned, to make sure you understand the novel so far. So reread the chapters of the novel. If there was a part that you really didn't understand, you might also go back to the discussion board threads where we talk about what's going on in the novel and sort out its difficulties there. So use those discussion board threads to help you make sure that you're remembering the novel and that it's fresh in your mind. There's no shame in rereading this novel. It's a difficult piece of reading, so you very well may need to read it more than once. And it would be great to have it fresh in your head right before this test. See if you can apply the concepts from the art of critical reading to the novel, The Island of Dr. Moreau. Brainstorm some questions for yourself. Put them in a bowl and stir. Set a timer for 5 minutes, and then pull a question out of the bowl and see if you can write a 5-sentence answer to it in about 5 minutes' time. You may not be able to finish, and certainly on the test you'll be allotted more time than just 5 minutes per answer. But it's a good way to practice and really stretch your muscles. If you know you can do a decent answer in 5 minutes, then the amount of time you'll be allotted for it on the test should be plenty of time. Okay, and then just repeat this. The more you practice it, the more confidence you'll have. And the reason you're pulling them out of a bowl is to practice that idea of having a question thrown at you that you may not be quite ready for or quite ready for expecting. And although you can't totally surprise yourself, you can practice it a little by at least not knowing which question you're going to get asked. I have given you some questions here that lead you to the kinds of questions you might brainstorm, like what is the purpose of the novel and why do I say that's the purpose? And remember, with purpose, we're looking at 3 choices there. We've got entertain, inform, or convince, right? So what is the main idea of the novel and why do I say that? Now, you may not really know the main idea of the novel until the end of the novel, but you've got a good idea of what's going on so far, so you might take an educated guess on a question like that. What are some of the most important major supporting details of the novel? See if you can kind of talk about the novel without it right in front of you as a way to study. What kinds of things has the novel asked the reader to infer so far? What kinds of things have you had to figure out for yourself? How does H.G. Wells require his reader to use inference? What's he doing to us that makes us use this inference skill that we've talked so much about? What's the tone of the novel when it first begins? What's the tone of the novel when the narrator's on the boat? Is it different? Is it the same? What is the tone of the novel when the narrator lands on the island? Does the tone start to shift or does it stay mostly the same? What tone does Dr. Moreau take with the narrator? Is he stuck up? Is he proud? Is he worried? What kind of tone words would you use to describe some of those conversations they have early on? Don't limit yourself to these questions. These are just a few off the top of my head. Brainstorm as many as you can think of because you never know quite exactly what's going to be thrown at you. The last things that I will mention is that the test is closed book. The Proctor U folks are going to check to make sure that you do not have a copy of your novel with you and that you do not have any books or notes with you at all. Your desk should be empty when you take this test. Empty, 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 empty. If you are being asked to talk about the novel, you are being given a passage from the novel to look at when you talk about it. So you do not need to have anything with you to take this test. It is a closed book exam. All right, one more time. I'm just going to run you through these steps one more time. It's a 2-part exam. You have to take both parts. You'll get immediate feedback on part 1. That's 100 points. And you'll get feedback within a week on part 2. That's another 50 points. It contains multiple choice in part 1 and short answer in part 2. You study using some note cards for the first part, and you study using some questions in the second part, and put them in a bowl and test yourself to see if you can write a short answer question in about 5 minutes. If you do these things and if you review your quizzes, I think you're going to have a really good time taking this test. It's going to go easily for you. Again, if your quizzes have gone well and if you've been keeping up with the reading, you should do just fine. So focus, get everything fresh in your mind, and make sure you're signed up with Proctor U, and you should be all set.